各位观众朋友，大家好，欢迎收看 J 与 J 论坛，有我 Jimmy 马健，有我们老朋友、好朋友 Jim Notway 跟我们一起讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jim?
Good afternoon, Jimmy. Here we are, another very eventful week.
It's every week now we have never-ending topics and current events that we should discuss, that we should learn, and we should pass on this knowledge to our audience. Well, it is a glorious day in Houston, Texas today. Beautiful, beautiful day, and the beginning of summer.
Magnificent day. Makes you happy to be alive.
It is, especially after all that we've been through. Now we have so many things going on, and I know what's in the headlines is, of course, the pandemic and what's happening in India. What our audience know or may not know is that because of international commerce, because of with technology, maybe 40 years ago or even 20 years ago, what happens in India might not affect us as much. But the fact is, this pandemic, when it started, affected China, it affected supply chain, it affected our economy. Now what's going on in India will have the same result. Most of us Americans do not know that a lot of our back office, a lot of our tech support are in India. But beside that, on humanitarian reasons, what's happening in India is a shame. And their political structure, including Modi, somebody needs to be responsible and accountable for this. What is your take on what's going on in, I mean, not just India, of course, Brazil too. I mean, it's nuts.
Well, I have several takes on that, and I'm glad you mentioned Brazil as well as India. The first one is, I think it points to as unhappy with the way things have gone here in the United States, as many of us are. We thought we could have done a lot better. On a relative basis, we've actually done reasonably well, most especially because we developed the vaccine that everybody desperately needs now. And after some rocky starts, we got our healthcare system back into balance. We flattened the curve. We overwhelmed it a little bit at the beginning, but by and large, and we've had more than our share of deaths, of course, but by and large, we're now on the backside and we can see the end in sight. And we now have a surplus of vaccines, which leads me to the second thing. Most of the developing world, India is a great example, Brazil is another example, and those are the ones we hear about because they are so large. But on a relative basis, I strongly suspect places like Mexico, other parts of Southeast Asia, definitely parts of Africa, and other parts of Latin America are in probably just as bad a shape as India and Brazil. And while they do not have the medical resources, even on a pro rata basis like we do, they do. The Indian cities like Mumbai and Calcutta and Delhi are very large and sophisticated. The two big cities in Brazil, Rio and Sao Paulo, are very large, cosmopolitan, sophisticated areas that have big medical centers, and they're simply overwhelmed. The United States prides itself on having a major humanitarian commitment to the rest of the world. That's why we've done what we've done over the years. My 2 cents are that what we should be doing now is sending every resource that we possibly can. And I don't just mean oxygen tanks and food. We should be sending medical resources, including the ability to build makeshift hospitals. We should be sending aircraft carriers to dock outside the big port cities, certainly in India and Brazil, and provide every bit of resources we possibly can to distribute throughout there. And both of them are huge countries with huge populations, okay? And it's spreading. It probably already has spread, but it's exponentially increasing. And it's overwhelming their ability to deal with it. All you have to do is take the numbers and the process that's already in place and trace through the math. And it will be devastating for those countries and be devastating for the spread internationally. several years ago, my wife and I and other members of our family hiked very high in the Himalayas through Nepal. And a couple of years before that, my wife went to Tibet, and she rode her bicycle from Lhasa, Tibet to Kathmandu, Nepal. Okay, 20,000 feet. Okay. And so we understand what the demography of those places actually are, what the composition of their cities are, et cetera. They're massively overcrowded, under-resourced. They don't have enough electricity. They do not have enough fresh water. They do not have enough water treatment plants, all of those kind of things. It's much like Mexico City. I mean, there's a sophisticated area, but then it's the burgeoning young population. If the Indian disease spreads into Bhutan, into Nepal, those countries are going to be devastated too. It could be very, very bad. You know Southeast Asia probably better than I do, but many of those countries, the big cities, have just as much risk. And they all have their other problems, like in Burma or Myanmar as well. And Bangladesh, same kind of thing. And we know that Pakistan has been having problems with it already. And that's a very big, dense country as well. And we haven't even talked about Africa, but there's, a South African strain or variant already. Okay. So this is a humanitarian crisis of proportions I don't think we've yet seen. And we talk about the science, but the math is the math. Some of the science is disputable, but the math isn't. The exponential spreading is really significant. And I don't think anybody has a handle on it yet. The World Health Organization, I have no idea what their ability is to deliver relief and to deliver medical assistance and aid. I suspect it's not there. They do policy, they do epidemiology studies, whatever they do. They certainly talk politics, but I don't know that they have resources to go in. Like the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in refugee situations actually do go in and try to keep peace and actually try to deal with, provide aid to refugees. I don't know that the World Health Organization has any capacity to do that. I don't know that there are international agencies, so it falls to the United States and maybe with some capacity from Europe. For instance, my understanding is that here in the United States, we have major supplies of AstraZeneca. What is it? I should be able to pronounce it better, but I can't. That vaccine that has been approved and used throughout Europe, particularly in the UK, but we have not approved it yet. But we're just sitting on huge numbers of inventory of that because we ordered it, even though it hasn't been approved.
I'm sorry. I'm going to look up. Is Astra? Okay. Go ahead.
AstraZeneca.
AstraZeneca.
Yeah. But we have not approved it for our own. So some people say if we haven't approved it, we can't just in effect pass the trash to somebody else. We need to approve it on an emergency basis, like we did the other three, and then distribute it throughout the world. As quickly as possible. The UK should be doing the same thing.
Everything you just said, it just makes me sad because no matter what everybody else criticizes the United States, especially over the past few years, when there is this kind of crisis, world crises, it's always been the United States that had to come out and lend a helping hand based on humanitarian and based on religious reasons, whatever it is, as Christians. But the irony is that the countries that has resorted to extremism, their political system, in this leadership, somebody needs to be accountable for it so that this will not happen again. I know during this time of crisis, we should not bring it up, but the countries getting hit hard are also the same ones that boasted that they beat the crisis, they beat the pandemic, they beat the virus. They're also the ones that, when you say I know Southeast Asia or Asia countries very well, I do. Do you know why those countries, say Korea, Japan, Taiwan, China, Vietnam, why these countries have not spread? It's not because the government's efficiency. No, I mean, the government will take credit. It's because the people, Asians generally are very, how do I say this? I don't want to use the word obedient, more concerned with public image, and they go along. So everyone wears a mask and social distance on their own. I know a lot of countries are begging for the vaccine, any vaccine, they will be so willing to take it. Well, here in our country, there's anti-vaxxers, there's people that they refuse to take the vaccine. It's a farce. And you know what concerns me is that our trade representative that's appointed by President Biden, Ms. Catherine Tai, has supposed openly that we release the vaccine, AstraZeneca and Johnson Johnson and all the extra Pfizers to India because it's a trade advantage. As our companies that pour the money, the R&D and the research is a how do I say it's a business? Yeah.
Well, intellectual property is patent protection. The other controversy that's going on now is the Biden administration has proposed suspending patents, which would allow everyone else then to use the patents and technology and to dramatically increase production here in the United States. I think that would be a terrible move for all kinds of reasons. That would be like the government coming in and saying, I want your house, I want your building, and then just taking it. There are constitutional prohibitions against government doing that. The government should step up and pay for it. And then, I mean, if Mr. Biden can issue $2 trillion pieces of legislation for $6 trillion, you're talking about 2 decimal points of what this would cost to supply vaccine to the rest of the world. And we should be doing that. And to your point about holding people accountable, there's that when you're up to your ass in alligators, don't worry about who filled the swamp, okay? We need to drain the swamp, and then we'll figure out what actually happened. But right now, our objective should be to save lives. And
absolutely agree. Absolutely agree that that's the first.
It's that simple. And when we went in after World War II, both to Japan and Germany, even though those people waged war on us and caused untold hardships for us and others, we said, "The hell with it. We're going to help the people who are left, and we're going to rebuild." And that's been those 2 countries have been and what they did to stimulate activity throughout the rest of their continents. Been some of the greatest success stories in world history. So we should be doing the same thing.
It will end up being mutually beneficial for the United States and for the rest of the world by controlling the pandemic, with increased trade, increase everything. And base, like you said, the base is saving lives. Human lives you cannot measure it in the amount of patent or money or investment. You cannot. And it is a shame that this is going on, because I know in Taiwan and there are other Southeast countries that cannot get a vaccine, that politics has dragged it out and people cannot visit and they cannot leave. And it is a mess. And even here, there's that 1/3 of the population that is still skeptical about the vaccine, or they're straight anti-vaxxers. And it behooves me, the conspiracy theorists out there that claims that me and you are both vaccinated. We know we're not being monitored by the government or that they're implanting something in us. I mean, we know, but how do I explain to someone? And these are logical, educated folks. We cannot just dismiss them to say that these conspiracy theories are crazy people. I know them. Some of them are not crazy. They're just being so snake bitten by the media, so manipulated for so long that they lost faith and lost trust in the institution and in the government. And it's a shame that it led us down to this way, because we're not out. I'm happy that we get to see there's some clarity. Hopefully by fall, we should get there. But of course, CDC has been very stringent, and we see a lot of news reports that are also one-sided too. On both sides, some are saying that we might not reach that, or we talk about herd immunity for a long time. Are we going to get there? It will depend on the 1/3 of the population that are anti-vaxxers, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, there again, the last thing I would, as much as I think there's a public health emergency still here in the United States, people need to take the vaccine. The last thing I would do is to do anything to make it compulsory, because the irony of it is the harder you push, the more people back up. Okay. We should have no discussion about vaccine passports or other things like that. If a private organization like a restaurant or an airline says, in order to patronize our business, you must be vaccinated, that's up to them. And we should allow them to make the rules within their private property. And I include an airplane as private property, okay? Mm-hmm. Let them do it. But for the government to try to push something, let it go. And the other thing about this herd immunity for Mr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci or whoever now says we're not going to reach herd immunity, to me, that's a politicization of the science. The math worked just as well today and tomorrow as it did 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago. The herd immunity is coming. I think we've always understated the number of, quote, cases that we have. There's a lot of people that have the antibodies out there that we just don't know because we haven't done adequate testing along the way. The herd immunity will actually continue to come. And for somebody like myself, who's been vaccinated twice, my wife, look, I wear a mask and I go in a place because I want to be respectful of somebody else. Do I think I need it? No, I don't. Is it 100% proof? No, but it's 97% proof. Okay. That's pretty high odds for me. So I'm protected from them and they're protected from me. And
if everybody thinks like this, we'll never have gone to this point, Jim. We both know that what you represent is a logical, pragmatic person that has compassion, empathy, that cares about others. But let's be real. We have friends and people that we work with. There are other Americans that do not think that way. They want to make it a political statement to be anti-mask, to be anti-vaccine. They want to make everything about what is our liberty or independence, which has nothing to do with it. They take advantage of our Constitution to use it, just like with assault rifles. I mean, we could go on and on. We just have to stop making everything about about politics, about whether
there's an irony that I think has gone on. Look, people like me, we've lived some of the best lives of any human in history. And
you're the greatest generation.
Well, my father was, but we've come right behind him. We've been the beneficiaries of the greatest generation because people of my parents' generation, maybe your grandparents' generation, created substantial wealth, increases in quality of life, all those, however you want to define it or measure
Absolutely.
it, or whatever. And ironically, once we have enough, you would think we would turn around and be charitable and be magnanimous and want to spread it. And in many ways we have. But many people, once they have enough, they want more.
Human nature, my friend.
Human nature, or their first thought is to protect what they have.
Generational wealth.
Yeah, and they don't just protect it, they keep other people from getting it.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that's just absurd.
But that fits the capitalist economy. Our society is built on wealth, fame, especially now with social media. There's a lot of envy, a lot of comparing with neighbors. It's never ending, this greed, my friend, never ending.
Yeah, it is.
Jim, no matter how much money we have, how educated we are, if we live in somewhere like India or Brazil, some of these countries you mentioned, unless you're the top 0.01% with your own private jet that you could fly out the country, which is what the Indian moguls did, hundreds of private jets flying up. But no matter how much money, how educated, when a pandemic hits like this, or war or crime, it does not spare you. We have to realize exactly what you said is we have to give back. We have to create a society where everyone has a chance to make it, where we can expand the middle class so we could travel and live freely as we have in the United States. From the 1950s to the end of the century, we didn't have mass shooting. We didn't have terrorist bombing. We didn't have the things that concern us. We didn't have to travel, not us, but some of the people that would have to travel with security or there's so many more concerns. It's not because we're older, so it happened. No, it really has changed. And, I want to discuss with you what you said about the greatest generation and also baby boomers. My father's 84, so he didn't have me until I was his first child, but he didn't get married until he was very old. He was 44. And then my grandfather, of course, fought in World War II with the United States against Japan. Both my grandfathers did. They were awarded, my grandfather on my mom's side was awarded a Silver Star by the United States Army. They worked together in Burma. My grandfather on my dad's side also worked with the U.S. against either way. So I hear I know the hardships, but remember, the reason why the greatest generation made it is because they went through the hardships of war, the terrors of war. And the baby boomers like yourself amassed wealth. But how do I say this? You worked very hard, your generation. But the fact is the environment allowed it. If you were born in the 30s, I don't care how hard you work, you're not going to make it there or if you're born in China in 1915 during the Civil War. It doesn't matter how smart, how nice of a guy, how smart you are. The environment does allow you. This government, our country afforded us this opportunity to make it. I have to work very hard to get there. I know that your generation, my parents' generation, my grandfathers is hard. But you hear the next generation, what they're saying, which there's some truth to it. Me and you will never be one of those guys that refuse to listen to what a different group or a younger group says. What they're saying is true too. They said that baby boomers is hoarding all the wealth. They don't have the same opportunities. They cannot afford to buy a home. The living wage now, you can't really live on a teacher's salary or a mechanic's salary, unlike 30 years ago, where you could still have a very good life doing blue collar work. Mm-hmm. Now you have such divide in wealth, and the numbers show it. Research show that these kids out of college does not have the same outlook, and they feel they're not as optimistic compared to the research they're doing in China. And most of our audience are Chinese Americans, Asian Americans. China is like US 40 years ago. Their young people have full of hope because they see opportunity. Anyone can make it. More developed countries like Japan, Taiwan, Korea, United States, we all have the same problem where young people do not feel as optimistic, where the wealth divide, the barrier is harder to break. So to respond to what you're saying, yeah, giving back, spreading out a little bit, creating more job growth. But we already agreed on the last episode, the Reaganomics have proved that it does not work. This trickle-down economics did not work. It created this massive corporations, super wealth with the billionaires. This is the same thing as the Rockefellers back in the 30s and 40s. It's the same thing where people have to break it up, where we have to have antitrust. How do we break up Microsoft? How do we break up Facebook and Google or Amazon? But the American dream is to achieve absolute wealth and power. So how do you do we go back to taxing at 70%? Like in the 60s and 70s?
Well, like we've talked about over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think the economic policies, back to your point about some of the young people today politically are overwhelmingly Democratic, Generation X and the millennials. And I think they're going down that road at their own peril. The Biden prescription is a prescription for greater class divide, greater government interference in your life, less entrepreneurship, more government dictate and less based upon your own initiative, every step of the way. I think we are going to hollow out the middle class. If teachers can't make enough money today, look what's going on with the teachers union. If you are a young couple and you can't keep your kids in school because the teachers unions are out, best move to Texas or move to Florida where we're open. look at the results of this census. And I actually think it's been tampered with to cut the extreme off. I think Texas earned 3 congressional seats, not 2. I think New York was going to lose 2, not 1. And there's a few other stories as well, but I'll let it go. But just look at the trends. And look what happened before we got on for taping our show just now. Look what happened to the open seat election this past weekend in Dallas, or North Dallas, Arlington area. So I think the young people really need to look hard at what's going on, and they do have some legitimate criticisms. I think our generation is stealing their future. And when Mr. Biden comes and says we're going to start spending $6 trillion, there is no way. Let's assume he's successful. There is no way that is going to be paid for currently. And there's only 2 different ways that can ever be paid back. Number one, extraordinarily heavy taxes on the future. And taxing the wealthy there aren't enough wealthy people, even in the United States, to tax that many people that much. It will come to much higher tax rates through the middle class, which will drive down the middle class. That's number one. Or number 2, inflate our way out. And I believe that's what Biden wants to do. It's not an effect. My observation is that is a cause. That is an intent. That's what he wants to do. Why else would Janet Yellen completely change her tune from what she was like in the late 90s when she was a member of the Federal Reserve? So
she had to retract her words the day before yesterday. Was it yesterday? The day before yesterday? Yes, on Tuesday, when she said that exactly like you said, inflation will rise. We need a the economy's increasing at an unhealthy rate, and at the market close, she had to retract her words. Probably got some pressure from the administration. But Jim, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said. But remember that the Democratic Party now is very different from the Democratic Party 40 years ago. Just like the Republican Party now, it's not the same. It changes every decade, every 20 years, 30 years, it changes with time. And these young people that are overwhelmingly Democrats, but young people are always going to be more idealistic, more confrontational, more liberal. Me and you would be considered probably extremists in college because you understand what I'm saying? We're not. We're open to new ideas. We didn't hold on to the old adage. You know what I mean, right? Like during that time you grew up, yeah.
My first presidential election was 1972. I was 19 or 20. And I voted for George McGovern because he was the peace candidate.
You see?
Okay. Not for
but our views changed, right?
There's an old adage. If you're not liberal when you're young and conservative when you're old, you didn't have a heart and you don't have a mind.
I absolutely. One of my closest college professors in graduate school, Professor Peterson, he always told me that Jimmy, you and your friends are going to vote Democrat. He's assuming that he didn't know what. You think you guys are progressive, you're going to change the world. I guarantee you after you get your first paycheck, you're going to vote Republican immediately. If not, then when you have a family, if you get married, if you have a kid, you will stop thinking the same. And he hasn't been wrong.
No. Things do change. Yes. And the other thing, you and I have talked about it, I think our democratic system is encountering things it's incapable of dealing with now in certain ways. One, the political system is structured all wrong. It rewards extremism, which is causing the divide. I thought that not just because 2 Republicans won the election, I thought the idea of having that, what they call a a jungle primary where the two top vote getters, that as a political incentive, that pulls people to the middle rather than apart, like in a typical party primary system. I think that was a great experiment. That's the way California has gone. And California is actually electing more Republican state senators and representatives, and elected, I think they turned over 4 or 5 congressional seats from Democrat to Republican this last election. And they were all won by women, mostly minority, several Asians, a couple of Hispanic women won those congressional seats as Republicans. So things maybe are beginning to change. Maybe the pendulum has swung too far. Maybe there will be some accountability. You mentioned off-year elections. That happened to Bill Clinton when he won. He won in 1992, but by 1994, he lost huge numbers of seats in Congress, and that created the Contract for America, and Newt Gingrich became Speaker, and all kinds of things began to change. When Obama won presidency in 2008, he passed Obamacare with a straight line party vote. But then and that was in 2009. By 2010, he lost at least the House. I think he lost the Senate too. Oh. I don't remember for sure. Lost both houses. For Trump's first 2 years, he had both houses as Republicans. Mm-hmm. Then he lost one, and then he lost the second. Lost the House in 18 and lost the Senate in 20.
And the White House itself.
And the White House itself. But right now, the Senate and the House are very, very close. So
I don't want to have a one-party dominance ever, because that never works in a country like this. It won't work.
Yeah, but what's amazing is they're both very close in terms of their numbers of the parties, but the party stances are widening apart, and it's getting more difficult to compromise and come together without severe criticism, without paying penalties, etc. And it's creating intra-party warfare, like you mentioned, Liz Cheney versus some of the others. And there's a lot of brush fires all around the Democrat Party as well.
But Jim, the Republican Party really is at a crossroad. You want to get away from Mr. Trump's rhetoric and go back to the conservative roots, or do you want to pander to this kind of inflammatory politics? This is not healthy. This is not good. Even if next year in 2022, Republicans gain some of the seats back, and you still have Trump in the background, either running in 2024 or kingmaker, having his own candidate, what it does is it's like what Hillary Clinton did. It galvanizes the opposition. So if you were a conservative, if you want us to swing the pendulum back to the middle, I think it's very important to distance from Mr. Trump's mistakes and get back to the conservative roots of Mr. Bush, Mr. Cheney. Look at what's going on. Look at Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney being attacked mercilessly. You mentioned the Republican congressional seat up for grabs in Arlington. The candidates that cow down to Trump won. I mean, the ones they didn't were eliminated. This kind of politics is not what I'm used to.
Well, maybe I'm not 100% convinced. I don't think Trump will be back.
I hope not
as a candidate. And I think as time goes on, he's less and less influential. He may be more and more influential on that part of the base, but it's not clear to me that part of the base is conservative. They may be in some respects populist, but that's not all clear to me. I think the truth or the direction is yet to be defined.
Trump cannot hijack the Republican Party, and he cannot hijack conservative values because he doesn't represent either of that.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
He has proven that he has not, and we need to bring that back. And you know that I'm left leaning. I'm more progressive, but I vote by candidate. But even I know that we cannot have a one party dominance in this system. It will not end well for any of us.
And actually, we've been talking about seesawing back and forth and seesawing back and forth. And one of the unfortunate things is Trump came in, he undid a lot of what Obama stood for. Now Biden comes in, he's undoing a lot of what Trump stood for, and there's penalty and there's blame. Biden can't make a statement without criticizing Trump. Sooner or later, he's got to get over that and get on with life, and the other Republicans do as well. But maybe that's what we should talk about next week.
All right. Now, I hope you have a great week. Enjoy this beautiful weather. And I look forward to talking to you. I hope our audience have a really good week. It's Mother's Day weekend. We want to wish all our mothers. Thank you for everything. I mean, there is nothing without mothers. We all know. So wish all our audience a happy Mother's Day.
My wife and I are going to go to San Antonio with our son and his pregnant wife. She's not a mother yet, but she will be soon.
Have a great time. Love San Antonio. Have a safe journey. We'll be in Galveston on the beach house this weekend and to enjoy.
Good for you. Good. Okay, Jimmy. Next week.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.